Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive. Today we are going to be jumping into something that's been making a lot of noise lately, AI, and how it might change the world of CAD design. You know, those software tools that basically help us design like everything around us, from huge skyscrapers to the smartphones we're all using every day. We've got two really interesting YouTube videos to break down for you today.
Okay.
One is from this SolidWorks expert, Arian Falahi, and the other is from Kinvert. And they both kind of dig into this question of, is AI on the verge of replacing human CAD designers?
Right. Yeah, that's a question on a lot of people's minds, especially with all the stuff we've been seeing about AI.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy how fast things are moving. And Arian actually makes this interesting point that AI isn't totally brand new.
Okay.
You know, companies like Google and Facebook have been using it for years, kind of behind the scenes.
Right.
But what's different now is how easy it is for anyone to use AI with these tools like ChatGPT. And that's what has everyone kind of freaking out, right? Like, look what happened to copywriting.
Yeah, for sure. It definitely shook things up. And I know a lot of graphic designers are getting nervous too. So is CAD design next?
Well, Arian seems to think so, especially for those CAD designers who aren't actively trying to stay ahead of the game. He does think that the top-tier designers are probably safe, at least for now.
I see.
But what I'm curious about is, why might AI be slower to change CAD design compared to some of those other fields?
That's a good question. Well, I think part of it is just that CAD design is way more complex than something like, say, writing a blog post.
Okay.
Arian uses this example of designing a single engine part.
Right.
Versus designing an entire engine, you know? And even with all the crazy algorithms that AI uses, it's still a huge challenge for AI to define all the constraints and relationships and boundaries.
So all the things that go into making sure an engine actually works.
Exactly. You have to factor in stress points, material properties, and how all those individual parts work together under all sorts of different conditions. It's kind of like, writing a simple sentence versus composing an entire symphony.
Wow, that's a great analogy.
Yeah.
So basically, it sounds like maybe AI is better at optimizing existing designs rather than creating brand new ones from scratch, at least for the time being.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, AI is really good at analyzing tons of data and running simulations. So it can tweak an engine part to make it lighter or stronger. But when it comes to coming up with a totally new design that has to meet a whole bunch of requirements, human ingenuity is still king.
Okay, so human designers aren't obsolete just yet.
Not yet.
But Arian does mention this prediction from Jordan Peterson.
Oh, yeah.
That a third of people in every industry, including CAD design, could end up losing their jobs because of AI.
Wow.
Which is kind of unsettling, to say the least.
Yeah.
What would even happen if a third of CAD designers were suddenly out of work? What would that do to the whole industry?
Well, it's really hard to say for sure, but it could lead to some pretty big changes. For one, it could make the field way more competitive.
Yeah.
You'd have all these designers fighting over fewer jobs. But then on the flip side, that scarcity of skilled designers could actually lead to higher salaries.
Oh, interesting.
And maybe even more leverage for the designers who are left. It's also possible that the industry would just adapt and start creating more specialized roles.
Okay.
Some designers might end up focusing on collaborating with AI to optimize those designs, while others might stick with the more conceptual stuff and user experience, the things where humans still have an edge.
So it's not just doom and gloom. There could be some positive outcomes too.
Right. It's all about how the industry evolves and adapts to these new tools.
So instead of being scared of becoming obsolete, maybe we should be thinking about how to use AI to become even better designers.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to look at it.
It's like turning a potential threat into an opportunity.
Absolutely, and that's actually what Arian is advocating for. He really emphasizes the importance of continuous learning, not just in terms of traditional CAD skills, but also understanding how to use AI in our everyday work.
Yeah.
He even talks about how he rediscovered his own passion for CAD design by learning this new cloud-based software.
Oh, wow.
And experimenting with AI tools. This cloud-based software is really cool because it lets designers work from anywhere and collaborate with others online, which is becoming more and more important in a lot of different industries. And for him, it just opened up a whole new world of possibilities.
That's a really inspiring story. It's like he's saying that instead of seeing AI as the enemy, we should view it as a way to push the boundaries of what's possible in design.
Exactly. It's about using AI to enhance human creativity, not replace it.
I like that. So AI is a creative partner rather than a competitor.
Right. And that idea of collaboration is something that our second source, Kinvert's video, also touches on.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What does a Kinvert bring to the table in this whole AI and CAD design conversation?
Well, they start by going back to the basics of CAD design, what it is, how it works, why it's such a game changer.
I guess sometimes it's helpful to go back to square one, especially with all this talk about AI potentially turning everything upside down.
Exactly. I think Kinvert does a great job of laying that foundation before jumping into the more complex stuff about AI and design.
All right, let's hear what Kinvert has to say then. I'm ready to deep dive into those basics.
So Kinvert's video, they actually break down how CAD software lets us create these super intricate shapes on computers. They use this example of a tire.
But
if you think about designing a tire with all those grooves and curves, that would be a total nightmare to do by hand.
oh yeah,
CAD software makes that process so much easier.
it's amazing when you think about it.
Right. And Kinvert also points out that whole shift, from hand-drawn blueprints to these digital models with us today.
Yeah.
That transition totally changed how we design everything, from airplanes to, the phones we're using right now.
Absolutely. And while it's super interesting to talk about all the things AI could do in CAD design, Kinvert's video kind of reminds us that human designers are still the ones driving the whole process.
For sure.
So let's talk about that for a second. What does that human element actually look like in a design world that's becoming more and more influenced by AI? We've talked about some things AI might be really good at, but are there things where humans still have a clear advantage?
Totally. It really comes down to those qualities that AI hasn't quite figured out yet. Things like creativity, problem solving, and maybe most importantly, understanding what humans actually need and want.
Yeah, that makes sense.
An AI might be able to design a chair that's structurally perfect.
You're right.
But a human designer would think about things like, is it comfortable? Does it look good? How does this chair make someone feel when they sit in it?
It's like that whole form versus function thing.
Exactly.
So where does AI even fit in then, if we're talking about this human-centered design process? Is it more about collaboration rather than competition?
I think that's a really good point. The best case scenario is probably a partnership between AI and human designers. Imagine AI helping with all those super complicated calculations and simulations, which frees up human designers to focus on the big picture, the user experience, those little details that really make a design stand out.
So instead of robots taking over, it's more like humans and AI working together to achieve something, way better than either could do alone.
Right. It's about using the strengths of both.
But if AI starts doing more of the technical stuff, won't that change what it takes to be a successful CAD designer?
That's a great question. And it goes back to what Arian was saying about continuous learning. Just knowing how to use a specific software might not be enough anymore.
Yeah.
Future CAD designers will need to be adaptable, work well with AI, and really focus on those human aspects of design that AI can't replicate.
I'm definitely sensing a theme here. Adaptability and being open to new technology. We've talked a lot about what AI could mean for the design industry itself, but what about someone listening to this who's thinking about a career in CAD design? What advice would you give them?
I think the most important thing is to just be a lifelong learner. Don't just focus on the technical stuff, but also develop your critical thinking, problem solving, those communication skills that are going to be crucial in an AI-driven world.
So those soft skills are becoming just as important as the technical ones.
Definitely. And even more than that, cultivate your own creativity and stay curious. That's what will set you apart.
It's interesting that you mentioned those soft skills, like communication and collaboration. It seems like those are becoming just as valuable as the hard technical skills in this new era of design.
Totally.
But let's shift gears for a moment and talk about something that came up earlier. The concept of boundary conditions and constraints in CAD design. Could you break that down a bit more for our listeners who might not be familiar with those terms?
Sure. So in CAD design, constraints are basically rules or limitations that you set for your design.
Okay.
For example, you might say that a certain part can't be longer than 10 centimeters, or that two surfaces always have to stay parallel.
Good.
And those constraints help make sure that your design meets certain requirements, either functional or aesthetic.
So it's about setting boundaries for the design.
Yeah, exactly. And then boundary conditions are similar, but they usually relate to the forces or loads that your design will have to deal with in the real world.
Right.
Like if you're designing a bridge, you'd need to consider things like gravity, wind, traffic, all those forces that could act on the bridge.
So you're making sure the bridge can actually handle real-world conditions.
Right. And that's why AI might have trouble with some of the more complicated parts of CAD design.
Yeah.
Defining all those constraints and boundary conditions for a really complex design, it could be super tedious and difficult, even for an AI.
Because there are so many factors to consider.
Exactly. And human designers often have to make intuitive leaps and use their experience and knowledge in ways that are hard to program into an algorithm.
It's like that human intuition that AI hasn't quite mastered yet.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it.
This has been a fascinating deep dive so far. We've explored AI's potential impact on the CAD design industry, the evolving skill set required for future designers, and even gotten a bit technical with explanations of key concepts like constraints and boundary conditions. It feels like we've only scratched the surface of this whole AI and CAD design thing.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack.
But before we go, I want to circle back to something we talked about earlier. Both Arian and Kinvert seem to agree that even with all this AI stuff, human designers are still super important. What's the most important thing for them to keep in mind as things change so quickly?
I think the biggest thing is to see AI as a tool that makes you better, not a threat that's going to replace you. It's like you wouldn't expect a carpenter to build a house without a hammer and saw, right? Future designers will need to be good at using AI to solve those tricky design problems.
So instead of being scared of change, we got to embrace it and figure out how to use these new tools to our advantage.
Yeah, exactly.
Turn that fear into an opportunity.
And that means being willing to adapt and learn new things all the time. The design world has always been changing, but it's definitely speeding up.
Yeah, for sure.
The designers who stay ahead of the curve and are open to new tech, those are the ones who are going to do great.
It seems like this whole conversation comes down to one big question. How do we stay relevant in a world where AI keeps getting better and better?
Ooh, that's a tough one. I don't think there's an easy answer.
Yeah.
But I think it starts with recognizing what makes us human, those things that AI can't do yet.
Okay.
Creativity, empathy, thinking critically, and being able to understand and respond to complicated human needs and feelings.
It sounds like you're saying instead of trying to beat AI at its own game, we should focus on what we do best and use that to build a better relationship with AI.
Exactly. We can let AI handle the boring stuff,
Fair.
analyze mountains of data, come up with different design options, but ultimately it's human designers who are going to steer the ship, make sure the designs actually work for people and give those designs meaning.
So it's not about AI versus humans, but AI with humans.
Exactly. Finding that balance where AI helps us do amazing things we never could have done before.
This has been a really awesome deep dive. We've covered so much, from the nitty-gritty of AI and CAD design to the bigger picture of how we adapt and thrive in this crazy new world of tech. Anything else you want to share with our listeners before we wrap up?
I would just say keep learning about this stuff and think about how AI might change your own field. Things are changing fast, and it's up to all of us to shape the future in a way that's good for everyone.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Yeah.
And on that note, I think it's time for us to say goodbye. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into AI and CAD design. We hope you learned something new and maybe even had your mind blown a little bit. Until next time.